This is Young Pulse. I'm the host of the Game Dev TV Community Jam, and in this video I'm going to be highlighting one of the entries that I particularly liked. It's called Like Them. It's a fast-paced pixel puzzle game that is designed to test your reflexes. It's by Guilherme Raimondi, and he said it's his first game that he's ever made, also the first game that he's made using pixel graphics. So honestly, I'm not sure how much I believe that, seeing that the quality of this is very high. So maybe you have an art background or something like that. Um, but yeah, if you could, it would be great if you wrote like an article or something that kind of goes over how you create this game because I think you've done a really good job with it. The production value is very high, and there are quite a number of mechanics in here that aren't indicative of someone just starting out with Unity. So I'm not quite sure what you mean when you say this is the first game you've made. I have a feeling that may not be true. Correct me if wrong. But on his game page, you can play it in the browser if you want. I'm actually going to run it from source and then talk about the source a little bit later. Now, when you download his project and you open it up in Unity, you're going to get an error about a global namespace player control script that has already been declared. And that's because he's using the new input system and it auto-generates scripts, but for whatever reason, he's auto-generated the player control script twice. So in scripts, there's a player control script, and I've already fixed this error, but when you download it, there's going to be a player control script out here too. Make sure you delete the one that's called playercontrols.cs, not the one called playercontrols.inputActions. Yeah, so just delete the player controls CS script, and that will fix this error. Now, when running from source, I like to look at the build settings so I can determine the first scene that I should be running it from. Here's the main menu, and we're going ahead and hit play. Again, great pixel art graphics, great mood. I love this little tutorial scene here you have, as well as the little graphic here that shows you what the controls are and allow you, this sort of gives you a play place, allows you to run around and figure out how the game works. Now, there is one thing that did bug me about the player experience, and I'll explain it once I get to it. But basically, there's a bit of a sudden spike in difficulty, or I shouldn't say spike in difficulty, but a spike in pressure in terms of the game experience for the player. So here, as soon as I pick up this key, a timer is going to begin, and I'm going to be under time pressure to complete this level before the countdown runs out. Now, the reason why this bothers me is because generally we have some sort of precedent. Like if you play the Legend of Zelda series, it's an adventure game, and there's like the final boss behind the door. There's even a mini boss that you fight beforehand so that you're kind of prepped that, okay, once I go through this big door, the difficulty is going to spike on me. The issue is that there isn't a precedent for this kind of game. And so I don't see any sort of clock timer or anything that tells me that once I pick up this key, I'm suddenly going to be under time pressure. And the rest of the level has been so chill, and again, I can sit here forever and there's no pressure. But once I pick up this key, suddenly I'm under a ton of pressure, and without being forewarned or any sort of precedent for this in the genre, it's kind of jarring in the player experience. So if you continue to develop this further, I would try to address this issue, maybe some sort of, maybe a clock icon or something that tells me that once I pick up this key, something is going to change about the player experience. So I pick up the key, go through here. I don't even know how to do this part very well. I don't even know how to get those. But yeah, I almost got them, but yeah. That summarizes my thoughts on the game. Otherwise, great job in the production. Again, the graphics, the mood, it's all amazing. One of the most impressive entries I've seen in our jam. Now, to examine the source and the architecture here, the first thing you want to do is look in the scripts. There's a lot of different ways that Unity projects can be architected, but in my 6 years of Unity experience, they all boil down to some sort of tried and true pattern. So the first one I see here is I see Singleton. This immediately makes me think of the Singleton architecture or manager architecture, where you have a bunch of manager classes that control various aspects of the game, and most communication between scripts goes through the manager. The problem is I don't see a manager other than the audio manager. I mean, there's some other stuff in here like global game info, but this isn't really a manager per se. There's nothing that initializes the game. I see level loading, or rather level loader, and then here's level info. I don't see something that's indicative of a manager pattern. I see a bunch of scripts. And so I can confirm this. I go to Singleton, or I open up Singleton. I look at usages of Singleton, and it looks like there's global game info, there's a light, and otherwise there's no other usages of the Singleton abstract class. So he's not using Singleton managers as his architecture. What is his architecture then? Uh, in this case, I like to look at the player script, or if there's a number of player scripts, then I'll look at all of them. And the reason why is because the player controller is central to the gameplay experience, and so you can kind of get a feel for how the project is put together just based on the player code. So here I notice that there is no update function. So when there's no update function, that leads me to think that he's using an event system. Problem is there's no event callbacks here either. And so what exactly is the architecture he's using? Well, let's look at an important function like the death function. Let's look at the usages, and then here you'll find that, okay, it's used in player.cs. Yeah, whenever you take enough damage, you die. But it's also called in level info. In a countdown script, there's a find object of type player and a die function that's being called. So this is pretty indicative of spaghetti code. Now, I'm not, we all have our own prejudices or, reasons as to why spaghetti code is bad. In this case, for a jam game, this is fine. Most jams I've worked on, we use either like some sort of, well, we basically use singleton managers and spaghetti code. It's like a weird combination of both. In this case, there's not that many singleton managers. There's really just audio manager and then the rest is spaghetti code, which, again, in a jam, you're prioritizing speed and the ability to iterate quickly over code that is supposed to be some sort of scalable, robust thing. Thankfully, his functions are well named. I see countdown, I see variable names like timer. This code is easily readable. The only difficulty that you might have is putting it together if you were trying to make sense of the overall architecture. And again, for a jam game, this is completely fine because most of us that are looking at the source are going to be here because we want to see how it implements some feature, like maybe how pickups work, or maybe how some of those crushing obstacles in the level that move back and forth that deal damage to you, how those work. And for determining features, all you need is the find usages function, or find usages feature in your IDE. Then you kind of piece together, okay, what calls what, and then you could figure out how to build this feature yourself in whatever game you're making. In this case, if you did want to map out the level, it's kind of difficult to tell because the level gets loaded, but every function, it seems like, has a specific purpose, and every script seems to have a start method. And so what I can tell so far is that the level loads. There's a level loader that loads the level, and then everything else in the level initializes itself. So again, there's no DI container that's going to set up the scene for you. Every script has almost every script is attached to a game object somewhere in the level, and it uses the start method of that script, just a lifecycle function, to initialize the level. And then after that, that's whenever there's like the update function for movement. Everything else seems to run off of a combination of spaghetti code and the update. I guess the update pattern. Technically, update is a gameplay pattern, the update loop. But yeah, that's basically the architecture of this project, and that's how you would try to understand it. Again, I say spaghetti code a lot, but it's not in a negative sense. It's just it's a valid architecture for jam games, and it's just something you'll have to keep in mind if you do want to look at this source and try to make sense of it or try to understand how something's put together. It is held together essentially by scripts calling other scripts directly, as opposed to going through a DI container injection or interface injection or anything like that. So that's basically the source in this project. Again, great job, Guilherme. Overall production value is amazing. This is a game that I think emphasizes some of the highest aspects or highest elements of what a jam game can be. Not just for the Game Dev TV community jam, but if I was to see this in Ludum Dare or another jam, this would be a particularly impressive entry. So well done. And again, I do hope if you ever get around to it, to making an article or something about how you made this entry, I think we could all glean some insights from that. And so thank you for participating in this jam, and I hope to see more of your works in our community in the future.